Okay. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Midcoast Community Council for September 14th, 2022. Dan, would you please call the roll?
Sure. Jill?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Len?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Michelle, I'm sorry, Greg? Greg Diegas? And mute.
Thought I said yes.
I see you. And Claire?
Here.
And I'm here, so we're all here. 7 total.
Okay, thank you. We'll start with report from the Board of Supervisors. Lena, can you go ahead?
Yes. Thank you, Claire. So first things first, at the board meeting yesterday, the board approved the creation of a committee that will look into investigate the possibility of creating a civilian oversight of the sheriff's office. I'll be giving you more info on that when we have an outreach plan. There might be a study session that happens, but I'll keep you apprised of the opportunities to engage in that. They also voted on the creation of a $2 million grant for in basically homeless transformational programs. They're trying to look for innovative nonprofits and faith-based organizations. Cities and towns can also apply for that serve the homeless. And if you want more information on that, I have a link to an FAQ and a couple more. There's a meeting, then informational that you can go to as well. And then we had a conversation about the fuel tank at the Half Moon Bay Airport. And Michelle may report on this more, but Michelle and I found out that the FAA has approved the use of unleaded fuel for general aviation aircrafts, which is great because that was kind of one of the complicated issues where you had to have leaded fuel and unleaded fuel. So it seems like that is not necessarily the case going forward. So I don't know yet exactly when that's going to be available, but we've already advised our fuel provider that we want to have unleaded fuel at Half Moon Bay Airport. And we could maybe even like do a drop-in replacement. So basically have that instead. Which is kind of the goal, but I'm not exactly sure what the timeline looks like yet. So I'll let you know. And then lastly, I'll try and go quick, but just some info on COVID and monkeypox. So this month is kind of a good one because we've got the updated bivalent, I don't know how to pronounce that, COVID-19 booster that is now approved and available. And we're still at the very low level of COVID. Specifically about that new booster, I'm just going to read exactly from our update. The significant news on the vaccination front is that the FDA has authorized and CDC recommends the updated COVID-19 booster for Moderna for adults 18 years and older, and for Pfizer for 12 and older. So I'll give it some more information in my written update. If people have specific questions, I'm happy to answer them. But we have some information about where you can get them, that we are offering updated boosters through the county-run clinics. There's one in Half Moon Bay, also Kaiser and PAMF and pharmacies. And I think that is all I have updates for today. And I'm excited to take questions.
Other questions for Lena? I have one myself, but I'll let the others go first. Sid?
You know I do. I always have questions. Lena, a few months back, we requested that you find out when Steve Monowitz could come and address the Coastside Parks Mitigation Fund interest-bearing account with us. They have not raised the rate since 2016. And he's supposed to give a report to the Board of Supervisors every year annually. So I did request you to do that, and I'm not sure if you ever did. So could you let me know if he blew us off or you forgot to ask or what the deal was?
I would say the second one. I'm more than happy to have that happen. I'll work with Claire. I'm not sure when the MCC would want that on the agenda, but if they request it, I'm more than happy to.
Well, I attended the Parks Commission meeting September 1st via Zoom, and they were going over their annual budget for 2022, 2023. And as you know, that mitigation fund is to develop facilities for primarily Midcoast residents. And they didn't put anything down for next year for anything for the Midcoast as far as a project like a community center or anything. And when I asked them why they hadn't budgeted for it, Neil, who is our local commissioner, said it was because the MCC never got back to him. So I'm like, well, we're still waiting to hear from Steve Monowitz to find out how much money is in the fund now. So I hope that this will be something that doesn't get put off on the back burner again and again. I noticed Mid-Penn's on the upcoming agenda, and they're going to have their own community center probably before we do. But anyway, would you ask, and you can email me or call me direct or let Claire know or put it off some more, whatever. So he put you off or you put it off?
I'd say me.
Okay. I wasn't sure which was, you said the latter. Thank you.
I'm being confusing, sorry.
Okay. I'm not going to comment. This has been extremely complicated and we continue to follow up on it. Other than that, I will move on to Anne.
Hi, thank you so much. I know I haven't attended recently, so if I'm asking a question that's been answered, I'm sorry. I was just curious if anything has been done about the testing of lead in the soil at the Half Moon Bay Airport, and maybe now that's not an issue if you're changing to unleaded fuel, but I was just curious if anything had been followed up with that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Do you want me to answer it now, or I can go offline, whichever is better, Claire, whichever you prefer?
If it's brief, it would be helpful if you answer it now.
Okay, brief. Basically, I think after some consideration, we decided that if we were going to go for using funding, we wanted to go for just getting an unleaded fuel tank. At the time, the number I got for that was $750,000 flat to purchase it, and I think install it, and then there'd be ongoing maintenance costs. So the county was kind of moving forward on putting that in the September revisions of the budget to purchase it, and then working with the Half Moon Bay Airport to figure out who's going to be paying for maintenance, because we were going to use Measure K, which you can't use Measure K for ongoing payments. It's just not good policy. So that whole thing, but then we just found out what I said in my update, which is that the FAA is allowing unleaded fuel as the primary fuel source, which is great. And means that we could probably just replace it, which would save $750,000, which is also great. And then we just wouldn't have an unleaded fuel tank. So that's kind of why we didn't do the study, because we were just like, let's, instead of putting, $100,000 to a study, let's just move forward with unleaded fuel, because we know lead is just not good for people. That's kind of established. I hope that's briefish.
Okay, thank you. Dan.
Yes. I'm sure you can hear me. Okay. So, Lena, I put in a request in regards to coloring of concrete for the sidewalk work at Coronado, so that it's not the uncolored, pale, stark white. I didn't hear back from was it Zach? I think his name is.
Yeah, it's Zach. I'm sorry.
And I noticed they're already starting to pour concrete. So did that slip through, or?
I'm sorry. I thought Zach would reply. That's my bad for not following up. I was in a meeting with Ann Stillman today, and we brought up that concern, and she said it was going to be closer to a dark gray. I hope that's the case. That's what she said this morning.
Okay. And
actually, I think she's on the call if she wants to address it. Not to put you on the spot, Ann.
Yeah, I just would say that when we talked this morning, we talked about the paving of the multimodal trail, and I said it would be black it's asphalt, so it'd be black. I didn't realize that the discussion was about the curb return and the ramp at Coronado. That's just the typical color of asphalt.
Yeah, sorry, Ann. Thank you.
No worries.
yeah, so just so that there's no confusion, my concern was the color of the concrete and not having it uncolored, Uncolored concrete of today, when it dries, it's very pale, very stark, very reflective, and very much not blending in with the environment. And that area is, El Granada has, I think they have a concrete. All of Portola was colored with a tan concrete. They did a very good job. That was back, I think, in '95. Hopefully, we can see that concrete blends in with the area and not, doesn't dry out to be a stark white. So, Anne, are you clear on the concern?
Well, this is the first I'm hearing about it, so I believe it's not colored concrete. I'll double check on that, but I think that's the case. And there's not, the trail itself, like I said, is asphalt. It's really just at that return right there.
It's the sidewalk, the concrete sidewalk at Coronado. That's what we're talking about.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think I misrepresented it earlier.
That's fine. Go. I'll double back on my end, but I think it's not colored concrete. It's just your typical concrete at that curb return. And that's, a location where there's concrete on the job. Most of the job is not concrete, it's asphalt.
Okay. A little disturbed by that answer, but I'll move on. Lena, can you do me a favor and find out, maybe you could report back next meeting, is there any type of plastic turf policy that the county has? Synthetic turf? We had a presentation by the Plastic Free Future, Alejandra Warren, I believe was her name. And they pretty much told us that the use of plastics and the dangers in plastics in the environment are just skyrocketing. And so it's a concern. I think it's a valid question at this point in time to ask if there's a synthetic turf. I understand that there's a drought now, but there's other options. Anyway, that's you could get
absolutely back. Yeah, I'll get back to you, and I can do it via email and do an update too.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Harold?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak. So this is a follow-up question for Anne. So on the leaded fuel, just want to comment. So leaded fuel is cheaper than unleaded, and that probably makes an easy choice for pilots. Second one is I'm very concerned. I know the MCC reached out to the county and asked for lead tests. So we have about 12,000 residents, and we have decades of leaded fuel basically getting sprayed over us. The county website states that we have about 50,000 flight activities per year, so it's significant. The response from the Department of Public Works was basically saying 80% of our homes have lead, so there's no direct correlation if you have higher blood levels. And then the recommendation was, if you have a concern, go to your healthcare provider and get tested, which is a nice way to basically avoid understanding if you have a problem or not. Because if I go to the healthcare provider, it becomes PHI, so it doesn't go in a public record database. This is in direct contradiction to what Santa Clara County did. So they tested 17,000 children. They found high lead levels comparable to Flint, Michigan. So why is the county not investigating this? And in addition, I want to say that we have farming on the airport field, which is very, very concerning. We know the Dream Machines was canceled because that airport field is now getting farmed. And we also know that this was a World War II site. We know it was used for drag racing for 12 years. We know they still do live firefighting exercises. The firefighting foam used to be highly toxic. We have decades of airplanes flying over our head.
Harold, if you can articulate a question for Lena, that would be helpful.
So yeah, if you could follow up and request basically, we would like to understand, one, if you can get lead tests in a broader scale, for the community to understand if there's a problem, make that public. And then the second one, soil testing on the airport field to ensure whatever is getting produced there is good for consumption. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I can't remember if we did soil testing or not. I'll go look right now in my email. When it comes to the lead testing, I don't know if that's something that we'd still consider, but if there's a large community interest, I'm happy to advocate for that with the supervisor.
Okay. I would appreciate that. We have ascertained that elevated blood tests, even through private providers, are publicly available. So there is that. But thank you. If you could look into that further, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Mm.
I have a quick question on the Surfers Beach staircase.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding was that Caltrans went ahead and fixed it. There's still some pictures of it next door, and before I commented on them, I wanted to make sure that they actually had been fixed. Does anybody know about that?
I would defer to the public. I actually haven't.
It was a temporary repair. And Harvey might have a further statement, but my understanding is the city of Half Moon Bay, the county, and Caltrans did agree that Caltrans had the maintenance responsibility for that.
Yeah. When it comes to the maintenance responsibility, Caltrans built the stairs, and there is a part of the stairs that are in county property, but there was no maintenance agreement written, and they're the ones who applied for the permit, and they're the ones who built it. So to the county, and really realistically, it's kind of in a place that's going to need maintenance consistently. The county didn't feel like it was really our responsibility to take on maintenance for something that we didn't agree to when it was first built. But as for the repairs, I defer. Thank you, Dave, for helping too. I appreciate that.
Okay. Well, thank you, Lena, for your report and for what you're going to follow up on.
Yes.
We'll move to Rohrbach from Half Moon Bay, please.
Excuse me. I was a little delayed in getting my video and audio up to date. Might I have a moment to speak regarding the lead testing issue that was just previously discussed?
Well, we're not discussing it. Do you have a question specifically for Lena about county government?
Well, the specific question is, why wouldn't the government not want to do the testing when it is such a critical issue for the health of this community?
I'm happy to try and answer that.
Yeah, and I can weigh in as well if you want me to, Claire.
If you can answer that quickly, that would be great.
You or me, Michelle?
Yeah, so we had initially made a request back in February. The MCC had made a request of the county to do lead testing in 3 areas. We wanted testing of the blood levels of area children, testing of the water, and testing of the soil. And as a result, the county responded to our letter, did not do any of the testing we asked for, and did instead some runoff testing, which came back below levels. But we wrote a follow-up. I mean, there's many reasons for that. There's a couple letters actually on our website and a lot of good data that you can read. But then in June, we sent a follow-up letter to the county rescinding our request for testing because as it's shown with Santa Clara County around the Reed Hillview Airport, lead is being emitted from these airplanes. That we know it is a problem. Whether or not it got into the blood levels of residents in the area in the past is, I mean, it will be tested. Basically, children are tested routinely. And so people can be tested. It's actually generally covered by insurance. And so we decided that the best route forward was rather than do testing, because the Santa Clara study cost over $250,000 to do testing, we wanted to put the efforts and any potential funding into stopping the lead emissions. So what's kind of happened has happened. Obviously, it's terrible, and hopefully it hasn't impacted anyone. But if it, you know, we thought the best focus of our time and effort would be on stopping that. And the first thing we focused on was getting an unleaded fuel tank, which I had been, as recently as a couple of weeks ago, I met with Supervisor Horsley and tried to push for that being included in the budget revisions that were happening in September. And right around that same time where we were talking about that and pushing for it, it came out that this new unleaded fuel is now approved for use in all aircraft, which is the first unleaded fuel that's available for use in all aircraft. So okay. I got confirmation from the airport manager, Gretchen Kelly, that we've already requested for that to be available. Of course, there are supply chain issues, and it was just approved and everyone in the country probably wants it. So it is going to take some time to get here. But she also said that all of the almost all of the local pilots are on board with this, want the unleaded fuel option. So I hope I have the commitment from the county to switch over as soon as possible. And so rather than putting in a second tank, just taking that existing tank that has leaded fuel and switching that over to unleaded fuel. There are also definitely concerns about other things like farmers in the area, other exposure from everything that's been emitted in the past. And I think we need to continue to do that. But the MCC wrote a letter kind of deciding that we didn't want to push for additional testing. We wanted to, you know, put our money where it would stop the problem from happening in the future.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Michelle, and thanks for all your work on this. Now we'll go to Harvey.
Hello. In terms of the Surfers Beach staircase, the city asked the Coastal Commission for an opinion about who is responsible for maintaining that staircase. And the Coastal Commission was very clear that it's the responsibility of Caltrans. And I believe the repair is temporary, as Dave said, but it's at least better than nothing. So that's the way it's going to be, that Caltrans is now officially responsible to maintain that staircase. I have a couple of items that are important for the Midcoast. At the last city council meeting, we accepted our $8.5 million rather, from the County Transportation Authority for what we call the Highway 1 North Safety Project. I guess you would call it the Highway 1 South Safety Project. It includes the new signalization at Terrace, and probably the most important thing is the East Side Trail, which is going to be part of that effort to actually make a multimodal trail, which will allow people to use bicycles to get to the high school, to get to El Granada School, and that will start construction next year. So it's going to be a couple of years before it's finished, but it's going to happen, thank God. We also accepted $400,000 from the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative for a couple of really good projects. The one thing that probably affects more on the Midcoast is what is called digital navigators. These are going to help people to realize that if you're eligible for any one of a number of federal programs like Medi-Cal, food stamps, you can get free or very cheap broadband, and there will be helpful people called digital navigators, weird term, to help do the connections, to educate people about how to use the internet, and that in the 21st century is an absolute requirement that many people need to learn, and that the money that's coming from philanthropy is really a good first step. And My last update has to do with the end of summer festival that we've been having the last couple of years. It had been at Carter Park, but Carter Park is going to be under construction. So it'll be September 24th, 12 to 7 on Main Street near City Hall at 501 Main Street. That should be a really nice event. We're going to have lots of bands, food. It's going to be a real celebration of coming out of the COVID era. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Okay. Are there any questions for Harvey? Sid?
Harvey, what was the source of the $8.5 million grant you got?
That's San Mateo County Transit Authority. It's Measure A funds.
Okay. And are you guys going to do any sort of a study to see what you guys can do with your traffic flow down there in Half Moon Bay? Or it's not really a flow these days, but more like gridlock. But to get, you know, even if you had a study that would figure out how to get people into the school and out of the school at a certain time of day, and all the tourists on the weekends getting up on 92 from Highway 1, that sort of thing. Have you ever had such a study, or are you planning one?
We've had the transportation management plan, the previous city council meeting before this, and there were some ideas about how to improve traffic flow. One thing is to have deputies direct traffic on the busy weekends. I think one real win would be if we could get money for the school district to implement busing. There's money available for all electric buses. That will help on the weekdays, and that would be a real positive thing. So it's not clear that how to do that. We're working with the school district to study that.
Well, my question was if you had ever had a professional study done, not people, you know, spitballing at a city council meeting with ideas, but, you know, if there was any professional traffic flow analysis done for downtown Half Moon Bay area, because it's gotten pretty bad. And anyway, I went to the school district meeting last week too. And they said they might have a temporary adjustment by October 1st. He's working with the different schools to see if they could stagger their start times. That's part of the problem. Thank you, Harvey.
You're welcome.
Fran?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask something similar, Harvey, about, did you say you're going to put another signal in?
Yes, there's going to be a signal at Terrace.
At Terrace.
Yeah.
Well, I think one solution is to synchronize all the signals on Highway 1. If they could be synchronized so that when the first one turns green and the next one turns red, and that's what keeps going, and that's what holds up traffic, get them all synchronized. You know, have you all ever driven on the Great Highway in San Francisco? If you drive 35 miles an hour, there's a signal 31. On practically every block.
Yeah.
And you can go all the way through without ever stopping for miles. And but that's what we need here. And I think that would be a great solution. That's it.
Yeah. Caltrans is the agency in charge of those lights, and we've been talking to them about synchronization for a long time now. We hope it's going to happen.
Okay, that's what I was going to suggest, that you contact them again and make them do it. It's time, long past time.
Okay, thank you. Dan?
Yeah, thank you for your report, Harvey. So, yeah, I read the article, part of it in Half Moon Bay Review regarding the light and widening the road up to, I believe it's Grandview.
Right.
So my question, clearly, by widening it to four lanes, call it a fifth lane, the center divide, all the way up to Grandview. Now you're creating a big problem at Grandview. I'm sure that was discussed. Can you tell us what was said in regards? It's essentially going to be a parking lot bottleneck. You're going to have all this space, and it'll just get all filled up to be bumper to bumper. And now people leaving from Grandview are going to have to cross, more dangerously, 2 lanes. Eventually, you're going to have to put a light there. They'll be crying for a light there. And then where does it stop? And takes an hour and a half to get from Montero to Half Moon Bay. But specifically on the bottlenecking and just filling up the road with cars, idling from Grandview, from Highway Main Street to Grandview. Can you say anything about what was discussed that you're aware of?
Oh, yeah. When this was all brought up a couple of years ago, the question of where the widening would end was debated, and Grandview seemed to be the best location. There's no way you can go from 4 lanes to 2 lanes and not have some bottlenecking. But the decision was the best way for allowing people to get out of the neighborhoods would be to end the 4 laning at Grandview. So it wasn't arbitrarily decided. There were a lot of discussions whether it would end at Spindrift or further north, and the council was pretty clear that the best solution was to end it at Grandview.
So just to be clear, is it going to be 4 lanes all the way up to Grandview, not 100 yards back from Grandview, so that when Grandview is pulling out, they're only crossing 2 lanes? They're going to have to.
I believe that is correct. The plans are on the city website.
Okay, I'll look at those. Thank you, Harvey. It just does not make any logical sense to me. I just don't see any positive out of this. Sorry, but those are my thoughts.
I'd like to interrupt you for a minute, Dan. I thought you were finished, but I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm done.
I need to let Dave at least know that there are several people trying to get in on the link.
You see that, and Qua had problems too, but I don't understand it because I came in on both the agenda and the website link, and they're, as far as I can tell, identical.
Yeah, I checked that this time too. They were.
I came in from the agenda link. It worked.
So they may be coming in from an older link somewhere.
I'm not sure what we should tell them.
So Mark Wilbank says it's the calendar link that's not working.
Okay.
That link should not even be there. So I'll fix it. The calendar should not have a link.
Can you get
the Half Moon Bay Review pointed to the calendar this week in their email newsletter, to our calendar, and actually recognized our calendar as a good source for all the meetings in the community. So that's probably why. Why don't we just add it there for now?
Because it changes from meeting to meeting. And so
we need to
I thought we were keeping the same link for every meeting.
Oh, why don't you do it the same as the agenda?
Can you work on that, Dave? I'd appreciate it.
Can someone send the agenda itself by email to the people who are having trouble getting in?
Which I have already done, but okay. That's a good idea.
I already got Qua and Mark Wilbanks the link.
Okay.
As you can see, Mark's right there.
All right, good. All right, thank you. Okay, Anne, you've got a question for Harvey?
Hi, yes, I do. Thank you. I was able to listen in a little bit to the Board of Supervisors meeting yesterday, and they were mentioning a new council for farm workers, which sounded very positive. And they also mentioned additional housing in Half Moon Bay in the future. And so I didn't know if there was any additional information, if Harvey could let me know. Thank you.
I'd be glad to. There's a really exciting proposal that's called the San Benito Ranchero project, which is to make farmers out of farm workers. That project is trying to find some land now to allow the instruction so that people who just right now are farm workers but don't know how to manage farms or run them will get the instruction so that they can learn to become farmers. Part of the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative grant that the city received was to fund that San Benito Ranchero project. So yeah, that's part of what we're trying to do.
Okay, thank you.
How many units, Harvey?
Who is this?
Oh, wait. No, when you're asking about units, I think there's two separate issues. One is this farm worker to farmer project that is currently being brought. The other is senior farm worker housing at 555 Kelly, which is currently under an agreement that the city has made with Midpen and Alas to develop into a 40-unit senior farm worker housing and study or meeting center for farm workers. They're two separate projects.
Okay. All right, thank you. We'll go to Michelle for a final question for Harvey, and then we'll move on.
Hi, Harvey. Thanks for being here. I just wanted to ask a question about the safety improvements project for Highway 1 and whether roundabouts were considered.
That particular project that ends at Grandview, as we discussed, doesn't have roundabouts in it, but there is another study for trying to get grant money that would go all the way up to Frenchman's Creek, and roundabouts was certainly going to be part of that study. So again, it's two separate projects. One has been funded and is conceptually designed. The other is looking for money to include perhaps roundabouts at Frenchman's Creek.
But roundabouts weren't studied for the project that's now been approved. Is that right?
That's right.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. We're going to close.
I just have one quick question, just very fast. Clark, please. For Harvey. Harvey, I don't expect you to give me an answer, but I'd like, just like I asked Lena, can you get back to the council with whatever plastic turf policy the city of Half Moon Bay has? I'd really appreciate that. There is a big concern with the use of plastic. So can you do that for us?
I'll try, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, we are going to move on at this point. Is there anybody else from a public agency that's here to speak? Okay, if not, we'll go ahead and open public comment.
Ann Stillman has her hand raised.
I think she already spoke, didn't she?
I wanted to correct what I said, because I know that Mr. Haggerty was asking about whether the ramp at Coronado and Highway 1 was going to be colored. And I've been messaging my team on that and learning that, yeah, that ramp is to be colored, the brown color that has been used out on the coast. So I just wanted to clarify that. I think that was a modification that was made kind of recently, and I wasn't aware of it. So I just wanted to correct that. Okay, that's all.
Okay, sorry, Ann, I was confusing you with someone else. Thank you for the information.
No worries. Thank you. I just want to be accurate. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on to public comment. This is a chance for you to speak up for up to 3 minutes on anything which is not on the agenda. What's on the agenda tonight is some DPW issues with Montera schools and El Granada sidewalks and Cypress Point. So Kimberly Williams, you have 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Claire and council members. I wanted to gently and respectfully bring up a point of administrative practice and a question. And that is that when issues and topics are posted on the MCC website, I would suggest that when public comment is submitted in writing or given by video, that it's listed as public comment and not specifically pulled out for each commenter. I think that is a best practice with all councils and cities meetings that I attend, that public comment is objective and displayed generally objectively under public comment. So for instance, you wouldn't pull out my comment this evening and say on the website comments from Kimberly Williams specifically. Does that make sense? I guess I've seen that on your website for some topics, and I wonder if we could address that. And maybe we don't need to discuss it now to preserve time, but at some point I'd like to hear your answer for why you're doing that, or perhaps consider changing that process.
Okay,
Kimberly, could I ask you to paste a specific example of that or date or whatever into chat? Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Kimberly. We don't usually respond to these things during public comment, so we will take a look at that. Thank you. Ann?
Thank you so much. This is just an aside, but I had a personal issue that I don't know if it's a county-wide, or I should say Midcoast-wide, but during the last rain, which was a long time ago, but it did come down really hard. And I know that in the future, they say this is what we should expect with climate change, that we will have some heavy rains and then long periods of drought. But long story short, the street behind mine, the people paved it themselves, but they did not put in drainage, and my house flooded because the land can just not absorb the amount of rain that came down at the time. And I don't know if there's any regulation or if there's any way to get a regulation to force.
County should be on top of that.
Oh, yes. But I didn't know if this is a problem on the Midcoast with others having this happen as well. And is it something that perhaps could be another agenda item at some point and addressed and a letter written and presented to the county for this issue? Because I'm sure this may happen in other areas on the coast, and it could happen to other people.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. We can take a look at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
You may want to contact one of us individually as well, so to remind us. Thanks.
I appreciate that. So thank you very much.
Okay. Dave? Wait a minute, you're not public comment.
Yeah, I have an announcement at the end of public comment.
Okay. Sid, 3 minutes.
This is piggybacking on what Kimberly brought up. And I'm sure Fran will be happy to hear about it too, because Qua Vo and Ann Stillman are both on the line tonight. But Fran and I both always attend the Parks Commission meetings. And Fran has brought up the fact that when it rains really hard, Quarry Park gets it overflows down her street, Santa Maria, through El Granada. It affects quite a few neighbors. And a lot of the neighbors wrote in on the Quarry Park master plan, and Nicholas did not post those on his website or make the public comment, the written public comment available during the for that meeting, which was discussing Quarry Park. So he basically kind of shuffled it off and said that's Department of Public Works problem, not ours, but it is coming from Quarry Park. So as far as posting public comments goes, I think it might help to have people's comments posted if they send in written documentation so you can read it before the meeting. But I'm not sure if that is what Kimberly was talking about. I'm not exactly sure what she was referring to exactly, but that would be an example of when it's helpful to have the public comment posted, the written public comment posted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll close public comment. Dave, you had an announcement?
Yes, I just wanted to report on one more thing that happened at the Board of Supervisors meeting this morning. It is for something that we have commented on several times, the propane tank that's adjacent to Pillar Ridge. The Sierra Club and Green Foothills had appealed the Planning Commission approval of the CDP. After a lot of discussion, the Board of Supervisors Dawn suggested that the county pursue having the tank removed by, this is the wording I have, I don't completely understand it, by directing the planning department to add to its work plan a proposal to amortize out the existing uses by rezoning the parcel, which I assume is basically they will amortize and pay for the tank when they rezone it to avoid the taking issues. But that's an issue particularly important to a number of citizens on the west side of the airport. So I was not completely happy that the appeal was denied, but it seems like we may finally get rid of that. That's it.
Okay, well, public comment is closed. We are moving on, but
there was at least one hand up before you closed it?
No, there wasn't.
Yes, Fran's was up when mine was up.
Looks like she took it down.
We've got a long meeting tonight. We've got a lot of things to get through. We can't keep bickering about this kind of stuff. I did close it. We are going to move on. I do want to make a quick announcement. The MCC did have a booth at the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space Anniversary Celebration this weekend. I want to particularly thank the people who worked on that, especially Jill and Michelle and people who helped with it, the booth itself, which was Dan and Dave and myself. So thank you for that. We're going to move to the consent agenda. There's 4 items on the consent agenda. First is the minutes for the last meeting, and we will defer that until the next meeting. We're also renewing our permission that we continue remote meetings at this time. There's also a letter of support for the bicycle pedestrian trail that Half Moon Bay is going to be putting in on the east side of Highway 1 to connect with the county trail that's currently being constructed. That's the one that Harvey was just talking about. And also recognition of Hispanic Heritage Month. So is there a motion?
I move that we approve the consent agenda with the exception of the minutes.
Second.
Okay. Thank you. Dan, could you please call the roll?
Yes, Claire?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
Jill?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Len?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
And I'm yes, so that's 7-0.
Okay, thank you.
Passes.
Thank you. Okay, we can now move into the regular agenda. And the first item on the regular agenda regards some public health, some public works issues relating to specific issues on the Midcoast. And I will turn that over to Greg Villegas.
Thanks, Claire. I believe Qua was now able to get in, and there he is. We also have Ann Stillman here. There are two issues I had spoken to Qua about, I think it was last week. One has to do with the safety issues on Avenue Portola in El Granada on sidewalks. And the other is the signless intersections in Montero, where we'd asked for traffic signs near the school. I posted material on the website under the agenda on both these issues. I'm not going to present any slides. I knew we had a busy meeting here, and I believe Qua is fully familiar with the documents. He augmented the material, gave me some information on the code that applies, for example, to sidewalks, which is also in there. So I want to go to the sidewalk issue first and invite Qua to speak to what he knows about the situation and what can be done. And then we will entertain questions from the public and the council. And then we'll go after that sidewalk into the stop sign issue that I raised in Montero. Okay, Qua, it's your turn.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, everybody. I wanted to preface by saying a few items first. I will not address any specific comments to a specific property or a resident in any specific location out of privacy and out of respect for those individuals. The issues and the topics I'll discuss will be in general in nature. If there are questions regarding policies, procedures, I will be more than happy to discuss that. But again, I will not be addressing any specific properties or address property owners. With that, about sidewalk, there have been some questions, some concerns about sidewalk, especially on Avenue Portola. We've discussed various issues. There were some questions about blockage of what is supposedly sidewalk by vegetation, by landscaping, by planters and some bricks in certain areas, and also some fencing along that area. And this is not just specific to Avenue Portola, but it's throughout the entire area, and not just in El Granada, but in other communities out in the coast also. As you've all known, unincorporated areas, when it was developed, the developers would be the ones who would be responsible for installing and building sidewalks. After the development is in, if no sidewalks are installed, it would be up to the community, the homeowners, if they want to install and build sidewalk in their community or in their neighborhood. And that is something I can talk about and share and make some suggestions and recommendations on how the community could look at developing and building sidewalk for the area. With respect to locations where there are questions or concerns about access, people wanting to walk across the area, if there is no sidewalk there, per definition, it's really not an encroachment issue. And we've discussed this with legal. And if the property is not in a development process, in other words, if that property owner is not submitting for an encroachment permit or a building permit that requires a certain percentage of redevelopment of their property, then there's no nexus. There's nowhere that the county could compel that property owner to build sidewalk. So with that being said, there are options out there for the community if sidewalks are desired out there. An example would be for the community to look at, and I would suggest that this be discussed in a community-wide discussion, maybe a workshop forum. But as an example, is the Moss Beach community in the early 1990s decided that they want to have sidewalk, curb gut and sidewalk as part of a roadway reconstruction. So the community decided to tax themselves to fund the construction of sidewalk for that area. there are areas where only one side of the road has sidewalk and the other side does not have any sidewalk. So that's just because the community and specifically the neighbors on that street on one side or the other prefer to have sidewalk or prefer not to have sidewalk. So they would have to pay for the sidewalk if they choose to have sidewalk to be built along their frontage. So that's one option. Other options could be the developers or the homeowners, when they are developing or redeveloping that property, could also be conditioned to build sidewalk as part of the condition of approval by planning and building and also by public works. So that's two of the options that the community could look at and discuss. And we'll be glad to attend a workshop so we can have that discussion and put out some additional ideas and also gather and collect additional ideas from the community. I think the important thing is to see whether or not the community as a whole would like to have sidewalk and would be willing to potentially be impacted by that decision of requiring or having sidewalk to be built on their street. There are a lot of constraints with the roads that are out there. As you've seen out there, you live out there, you know the roads are very constrained by existing development, landscaping, planting, a lot of parking along the roadway, edge of roadway, drainage well, and things like that. So all of those have to be considered as part of a sidewalk assessment if we were to look in that direction. But that's certainly something that we can discuss and see how we can move that forward should the community decides that's what it wants to do.
Kwa, if we hold this workshop, would you at that time be able to talk about the specific conditions of specific properties?
I don't think that would be the right time or the right place because again, you'll be putting one person out there and that is a privacy issue that we want to be respectful to that person or the property owners.
Well, we can speak in general.
I'm happy to organize a community meeting, but go ahead. Do we have comments? Claire, what's the right procedure here? Should we go for the council or to the public first? You're muted. She's still muted.
Okay. I think the council, if there are clarifying questions, but very limited, and then go to the community.
Okay, so council clarifying questions.
Okay, I have one.
Go ahead, Dave. Dan.
So, Kwa, if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying is that if there's a landscape obstruction where a sidewalk would be, you're very clear that you couldn't make the property owner put a sidewalk in. But are you really saying that you can't put any pressure on this property owner to clear so at least there's a path, even though it's not a sidewalk, but there's a walking path? Is this what I'm hearing you say correctly?
Yes, we don't have any way to compel that property owner to move, clear, and create a path through that area when there's no path exists.
So what you're saying is there's only two options: leave it the same, or go through and dramatically change the character of the whole coast side, mid-coast, and have it uniform.
That's not what I heard. What I heard him say was a specific neighborhood take action to change in their neighborhood.
Well, how would you divide up neighborhoods, Kwa? First of all, is that correct, what Greg said? I mean, I asked you, but Greg answered. What Greg said, is that correct?
How I would respond to that is it would be up to the community to decide how the community would look as part of this process. Because if we were to have that discussion, community-wide discussion, and the entire community look at it and say, yes, we want to have this pathway regardless of what's there or not. We will adopt that and we will bring that back to the board because, as you know, every single house out there has a different look and a different feel to it. If that is the path that the community wants to look, the community is going to have a vote, a voice to weigh in if that's what the majority of the community wants to do. Then we will listen to the voice of the community and come up with a policy and have the board adopt that policy and then move forward with that. Because to go and say each and every single property owner out there, we would have to do that assessment. And if we were to look at it now, I would say 99% of the properties have some issues that would and could be addressed. So is that what we want to do as Public Works? No, we would not want to do that. Is that what the community wants to do? I think the workshop will spell that out clearly when people hear the pros and the cons and the issues and have that really robust and open discussion. All of us here are probably not the majority of the community. If the majority of the community says, yes, that's what we want to do, then we certainly will listen to and develop a policy that would closely match with the voice of the community.
Okay, just to be again clear, you mentioned pathway and the answer that you just gave now in the beginning of that answer. So having sidewalks or just making sure that if there is no sidewalk, there is at least a pathway. Now, this is something that Public Works would get behind. Is that correct?
We would get behind whatever the majority of the community wants to do. We would certainly endorse and support that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Other council member clarifying questions?
My hand's
Glenn,
up.
your hand is raised.
Yes.
Glenn?
Two questions. First of all, when we speak to community, are we speaking of the individually recognized communities, Moss Beach, Montera, El Granada, et cetera, as each being a community? So you're not really talking about doing it at the whole Midcoast level, but at a community at that level or some other level? What's the definition of a community for a community meeting?
It would be more focused specifically the El Granada or the Moss Beach or the Princeton. That is more cohesive.
Gotcha. And so within that, for any one of those communities, did you say earlier on a whole block of houses could opt to have sidewalk and basically have a financing program for that? But
yes, for example.
Go ahead.
Yes, that is correct. In Moss Beach, and that's what was done back in the early 1990s, 91 and 92.
Okay, so it created a checkerboard, if you will. Some opted in and some opted out.
Yeah.
Okay, and so at this point, if you brought it forward for any given community, would that be looking for community consensus or giving each community to break itself down into into blocks and do it at that level?
I would think that's up to the community, say the El Granada community as a whole. If it wants to break up into individual smaller groups, blocks, that is all open for discussion. The one drawback with that is if you're, say, for example, let's use Avenue Portola. Let's say the majority of the folks on Avenue Portola want sidewalk and want to contribute to build sidewalk and pay for the sidewalk. How will the residents adjacent to that street be affected by that? How will they be contributed to that? What percentage will they be contributed to that? So that's going to be a very interesting discussion. How should the residents, or the majority of the folks on Avenue Portola, be the main responsible contributor to that sidewalk improvements, where others would also be benefiting from it, but without contributing to it financially. So a lot of discussions would have to take place to iron out and sort out those specifics.
But at the level of the council, the basic decision would be first whether to go to any particular community and hold such a meeting.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Were there questions now? We have public comment. Len, your hand's still raised. Mark, you wanted to comment? Mark Wilbanks?
Yes, thank you. I was a little confused. I get it that when there are pathways, you may not consider them sidewalks. I was a little unclear whether all of El Granada, for example, has been declared as sidewalk. Does cement count as a sidewalk, or is it all of El Granada does not have sidewalks?
Not all of El Granada has sidewalks.
Do the cement parts count as sidewalks?
It could if it was built to the sidewalk standards.
Okay. I was talking to Scott Birkland when he was out for some unrelated issues, and he indicated that where there are sidewalks and they're blocked, that the county will typically send out a letter threatening to fine the individuals if they don't unblock the sidewalk, but that Public Works had deemed that they just don't have the time to ever enforce the fines that are threatened in the letters. And I wonder if you could comment, is that truly the Public Works policy, and has anyone in an unincorporated area where there is a sidewalk ever been fined for blocking it?
I would say Scott was probably not presenting the whole picture correctly. If there is a sidewalk across the property and there is an impediment, some kind of blockage, then yes, that would be an issue that DPW could send a letter and have that issue addressed. In addition to that, DPW also do an annual inspection of all existing sidewalks. If there are damages on that sidewalk that's creating a tripping hazard, we also send letters and notifications to those property owners to advise them of the damaged sidewalk and gives them an option to either remove a tripping hazard or to replace a sidewalk at their choosing, one or the other. But that's what we do on an annual basis. As much as we can, we try to give that property owner as much flexibility and as much time as possible to address those issues. Sometimes we can get back to it within 60 days. Sometimes we don't get back to that property owner or that issue within 60 days. Yes, sometimes it takes us a lot longer to circle back to that issue, but eventually we will get back to that issue and work on it with the property owner to try to address that. Now, that's in an area if there's an existing sidewalk. If there is no existing sidewalk, that's not an encroachment. That's not a blockage. If it's somebody's landscape that's been there for 10 years, for 20 years, ever since the person built that house and it's been there, that is not an encroachment. The encroachment would be if it's in the roadway, if it's impacting the roadway, the travel way, then yes, that's absolutely something that we would address immediately.
Okay, no, I was talking about existing sidewalks. Scott indicated that you just didn't have the time to ever pursue that. There are several cases I'm aware of that have been out for a couple of years in El Granada where letters will get into the specific addresses, but that was a concern of how much time would go by before it would be visited or enforced, if at all.
Yeah, we have just implemented a new maintenance application where all of the issues are assigned a work order so we can track them easier now and be able to circle back within a certain time frame. So with that new system, I think there will be a lot of improvements on our end to see how often and how soon can we close those issues. And we're always looking at ways to improve our processes.
Excellent. Would it be useful if past cases were introduced into that system so they could be tracked?
Yes.
Okay, I can do that then. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I see we have two more comments from the public, and then we'll get to you, Dan. We have Sid Young with her hand raised.
Thank you. Kwa, I think I was living in Moss Beach when those little neighborhoods over there on the west side of Highway 1 decided they wanted to have sidewalks. And I believe they had to pay to have their parking turnouts paved and curbed and guttered and all of that. But I could be wrong because I don't live in that area, but I do live in Seal Cove. And when Jim Porter was the Department of Public Works person, there were, well, there was issues because they took away one of our roads and closed it, Ocean Boulevard, which I'm sure you're familiar with. So people were saying we needed more than one paved road to get in and out since they took away the main road. And so they did pave all of San Ramon from San Lucas down to Bernal, and they paved Del Mar from San Lucas to Bernal. But they did not charge us. They were trying to get us to pay for it, but it's a community serving area for all the dog walkers and stuff, and they didn't charge us. But they did allow us to pick if we wanted to pay for a driveway apron or something like that. So I think what you're saying for El Granada is if like a certain amount of neighbors wanted to go street by street and pave it, they could get together and do it. There are a few streets in Seal Cove where the neighbors paved it before this whole other issue came up when they closed down Ocean Boulevard. But they could do it that way. If like a whole block of people wanted sidewalks, they could work with you to get it to be the county approved condition or whatever you want to call it, and then get it that way.
Absolutely.
But there's no funding for it if you just say, you know, our street wants sidewalks. Right.
When you say there's no funding, are you talking about county funding source?
Yeah, through property taxes and gas taxes, I think they pave the roads, but I don't know about sidewalks. So we have a street lighting assessment in Montera, but it covers Moss Beach as well, but they have 7 street lights on Highway 1 and we have 1. So I don't know how that works and who figures out how many you get. We have a business district on both sides of Highway 1 and they don't, but they have more nighttime lighting. So it's, I just wondered if there's any kind of is it street by street, neighbor by neighbor who wants to pay? Is that the kind of a deal it is?
In essence, yes. But
okay.
When you get down into the details, it's a lot more complicated than street by street.
Okay, thanks.
I'd like to move on to Dolores Silva, who has her hand raised for this issue.
Hello,
Dolores.
hi, thank you for allowing me to speak. I just have an observation. We moved into this house in Moss Beach in 1990. And shortly after, we were assessed for sidewalks. And as I recall, the neighbors didn't want sidewalks. They wanted the street paved, part of Sierra, and I guess it was Stetson maybe, and something else. Because at that time, there were still a lot of, they're not county roads necessarily. And so they just had the sort of pseudo paving with oil and whatever. And so in order to get paved streets, we had to agree to sidewalks on one side, and we had to pay for whatever that portion was that ran along our property. And but most of us didn't want sidewalks because it conflicted with our coastal character vision. And I think it's not so easy to get neighbors to agree, I guess is what I'm going to say. Although, and some of these sidewalks ended up being sidewalks to nowhere. So I just wanted to make that comment, but we weren't really in favor of sidewalks. We had to do it to get pavement.
Thanks, Dolores. Dan, you wanted to add another comment?
Yeah, another question for Kwa. So, earlier you said that middle ground of clearing any obstruction and making sure that there is a reasonable path, not a concrete sidewalk, but a reasonable path, you're saying is not an option. My question to you is, if the community lobbied to the Board of Supervisors and they voted to allow that to be an option, Department of Public Works would have no problem? with that?
Let me clarify that a little bit more. If through this workshop, the community decides that it wants to have this pathway, and the majority of the community members approve that or accepts that and adopts that and move forward with that recommendation and go to the board, that's what the board will be looking at. And the board will ask Public Works, did you go through this process to get community input? And at that time, we would be able to say, yes, we did. We went through a workshop. The community presented options, pros and cons, constraints. And yes, that's the community's desire, is to have that path. And through that path, this is what we recommend to follow as a policy to implement the desire of the community. So yes.
Okay, thank you.
So seeing no more hands, I'd like to close the discussion and just take a follow-up action item on myself. I will work with Quo to try and enlist what we think is a community of interest. And Mark, and you and your neighbors be part of that. I think I need to understand how we contact the property owners, which ones we contact. And then as soon as we are satisfied we have come up with a scope that is appropriate, then we would enlist QA and DPW to hold that workshop and see what we can do to go from there. So I thank QA for those comments. I'd like to move on to the sidewalks, the stop signs in Montera. I don't see people here who might comment on that, but I should probably begin with an apology, because in my zeal as a new council member, I rushed off and filled out all the forms and asked for stop signs, partly because we saw a couple of them in Connect the Coast side. And as some people pointed out, it would probably take longer and cost more money to do the studies than erect the signs. And sure enough, you know, we found that when they did studies, the traffic didn't meet the requirements for doing the stop signs. So we're back to not having an endorsed action, but QA can speak to perhaps what might be possible and what we could do further to go from here to build upon the research that he has already done about the intersections near Farallon View School that do not have any signage, and where there's now another incident reported of a child almost being hit.
Thank you. Should I give a brief summary of the request, or should I just get right into the topic?
Well, the request is posted on the website. We had requested signage on 5 intersections. I hope we didn't ask for all-way stop signs, but whatever. I know there were certainly a request for 2-way signage on some of them. But go ahead to where the bottom line is, where you're headed.
All right, thank you. So the bottom line is the warrants were not there for stop signs at those intersections. But in addition to that, we looked at a whole neighborhood discussion and evaluation, if possible. We looked at the entire community where all the existing stop signs are, where potentially could yield signs be installed? Could additional signage be installed? Could additional pavement markings be installed? What else can we do out there short of installing stop signs? So we looked at yield sign. Would that be a possibility? It is a possibility. The issue is once you put yield signs up, the people who are traveling on the streets that do not have yield will typically drive faster, because now they know crossing traffic will have to yield to them. So in essence, you have now create a corridor where speed could potentially increase. And so you're increasing the possibility and the potential for collision or accident just because you are installing yield signs out there. So we have to be really, really mindful in looking at that. One of the areas that we're looking at is potentially alternating blocks with yields and see if that's a possibility. But as part of that evaluation, we have to look at the entire community where all the existing stop signs are, because if you put yield in, that impacts traffic circulation, the operation of the entire neighborhood. So we have not started in that process yet because it's a very intensive process. We're going to try to budget for that study, and hopefully we can get to that entire community traffic operation analysis within the next 12 months. If we can get funding for that, we'll move forward in that direction. But in the meantime, we're going to look at installing additional signage, pavement markings, and the intersections where we've looked at that might have some sight distance issue. We'll reach out to those property owners at those intersections to ask them to trim the trees, trim the vegetation, create better sight distance around the intersection. The reason why we want to reach out to the homeowners is to give them the opportunity to trim and raise the trees to their satisfaction and to their standards. If we were to go and do that with our maintenance staff, we're not trained landscape arborists. So we would just trim straight up to provide the sight distance. So it might not be to the satisfaction of the property owners the way we normally trim for maintenance and sight distance. So that's one of the reasons why we always want to provide that option to the property owners before we go out and do the trimming. With the large trees that are in place, we're not going to ask the property owners to remove those trees. We will ask the homeowners or the property owners to raise the trees up a little bit to create better sight distance. But we are to remove those trees or a tree because it's at the intersection. So that's what our plan is. Hopefully we can look at some ways to slow traffic down. We also put out, some of you who live in that area might have seen a couple speed radar feedback signs that we put out there as part of this evaluation. And that data came back and showed the speed was not that high as indicated by the community. The speed limit is 25. In general, the 85th percentile that we received from those radar feedback signs were around between 25 to 28 miles per hour. So that's in range and in line with the speed signs, speed limit signs, and the markings that are out there at this time.
Can the Measure K funds be used to fund the study that you would want to undertake?
That would be up to the supervisors to consider that for.
Well, rather than waiting, a whole year to get started, let me see, Lena, if you and I can approach Supervisor Horsley. If separately, if you could give me a figure for about the amount of money you think it takes to fund that study, I'd like to know what that is when you have your ducks in order. We have one question from a resident, Sid Young. You want to comment on this?
Yes, I did. It's actually about when you mentioned speed bumps or I guess drainage swales. Out in Seal Cove, we have one on San Lucas right at Del Mar, and people that come in, I mean, our neighborhood is full of visitors, so they drive out to the end to take a walk on the Gene Lauer Trail, or else they just driving through for being looky-loos, but they start to speed starting in Ocean Boulevard, and then they hit that bump, and I don't think the signs are in the right place because we can hear it like 4 houses away from that intersection when they scrape, and you can see bits of car parts and scratches on the actual bump itself. Is there any way you guys could mark it with those yellow arrows or put the signs a little lower so they can see them when they're driving through?
Absolutely. I actually did see that speed bump out there and noticed the signs were too close to the speed bump. So that was on my list of things.
Oh, goody. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
I also see Dan Haggerty has his hand raised. Right.
Yes. Thank you, Kwa. I was listening to you. Clearly, line of sight is very important for Department of Public Works or you. And I know that's sometimes difficult. I lobbied to get, there was a bunch of tall hedges in Half Moon Bay in front of the Wells Fargo Bank where when you're pulling out, you can't see if somebody's in a wheelchair or a bicycle riding on the sidewalk until you actually are in the sidewalk because of that corner. So these these corner visual line of sights are very, very important, and I see that you understand that. You know, another thing that is problematic, and I know it's probably the sheriff's department here, but you know, maybe you can help us on this situation in regards to cars that are have the dark tinting on the driver's side and the passenger side. I just recently, just less than 2 weeks ago, I saw a car that even the front windshield was blacked out. This is insane. I can't accept that this is continuing to go. I've been bringing it up for probably over 8 years now. I still see them. I have a friend who has this on his car, and he said he finally, after 5 years, he got a ticket, and he went to a police officer and showed a picture on his iPhone of a different car, and they signed off the ticket. He still has the stuff on. It's just absolutely absurd that this is not being enforced. It is absolutely not being enforced. I'm finding company vehicles. I'm finding, you know, and I think a lot of people, it's the culture nowadays. It's cool.
I understand this is an issue. I understand this is an issue and a matter of fact for you. But my point is, it is not directly relevant to the school signs in Montera. So I got to ask that we move on. Michelle.
No, please.
Dan, I have to ask,
to safety. We're talking about safety here. It's relevant.
Dan, we're talking about unsigned intersections near the schools in Montera.
I'm almost done.
Bravo has nothing to do with enforcement of tinted windows. Can we please move on? I had a question for you, Qua.
Qua, you heard me. Thank you.
Montera stop sign issue, and especially next to the school. I was wondering if, you know, stop signs clearly are a problem, the lack of, but with also part of the problem could be that there are not sidewalks extending very far beyond where Fair Lawn View School is. Have we considered potentially remediating? No, that's not right. Fixing the problem with sidewalks, and potentially, you know, some of those the signs that say "slow down" when children are present. Maybe it's some flashing signs or something that could help address this concern, especially around children coming to and from school.
Yes, we did look at that, and immediately surrounding the school, that intersection, there are enhanced signs that are out there already, along with the yellow marked crosswalks. We also looked at adding some additional signs a couple blocks leading into the school at that intersection. So that's part of the project that we're looking at, implementing the additional signage, the pavement markings, and things like that for that area. And we're looking at expanding the signage program farther and farther away from the school to hopefully let people know further in advance that they're getting into and closer to a school zone. With regard to
this type of fixes that could be done before this bigger study is done?
Yes.
On traffic? Okay. That's good.
With respect to the sidewalk discussion, it goes back to the same discussion earlier. Is if property owners want to do that, then yes, they can do that. And you know, would the school consider looking at some grants to help create that? But if you're going to put sidewalk just that one block, it's not going to really help the issue.
Right. That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Michelle. And the action item I have here is to follow up with Qua both on the ideas he's going to pursue and also on the issue of trying to fund and accelerate this study. And so with that comment, I think we're done with this agenda item, and I will ask Claire to resume control of the meeting.
Thank you, Greg. It sounds like we have some action.
Thank you to Qua and Ann for being here, by the way.
Yes. Thank you. I think this is very productive, and hopefully the follow-up will bear some fruit. We're going to move on to the item that probably most people are here for, which is the consideration of MCC comments on the application for the Cypress Point development. They have applied for a planning permit and a coastal development permit. And our task is to write a letter addressing items that were raised in the application. The application is on our website, on our Cypress Point page, and also attached to the agenda. It's all there, along with a few comments from the council. Since we started preparing for tonight's meeting, I have had more information regarding the environmental impact report. If you notice the application, the information on the biological impacts are basically missing. So there's not a lot we can comment on that, except to say that they're missing. There will be an environmental impact report done. The arrangements are being made to have that done. There will be a public scoping hearing on that before it takes place. There will also be a meeting to review the draft environmental impact report. So there'll be a number of environmentally related aspects to this application that we probably will not be considering very deeply tonight. But what we want to do tonight, rather than just do a complete scattershot of here's all the things that we think about this project, because it's been going on for 6 years or so, is to narrow down what topics we want the MCC's comment letter to address. So let me just make a little bit more of an introductory comment here. As I say, it's been under consideration for at least 6 years, and there's been much discussion. Information on the project is widely available. Some changes have been made in response to suggestions from MCC, from Midcoast Echo, and from others. The Coastal Commission has approved changes to the LCP that allowed the development. But the final proposal will go to the Planning Commission fairly soon. We have the opportunity to send them comments on the topics they will be considering. You will see their application on the MCC website and on the Cypress Point page and on the agenda notification for tonight. The letter we will write will be limited in scope and contain only some of the things that might be said about this project. I hope that individuals and groups will write their own letters to the Planning Commission and to the Board of Supervisors, especially if you anticipate being part of an appeal or lawsuit. In that case, you absolutely have to write your own letter. In order to reach an agreement on what to put in the MCC comment letter, I will be asking for a tight structure tonight. I want you to be aware that this does not mean that I'm taking a position or trying to be unfair. I live in Moss Beach. I wake up every day for the last 2 years to construction on a project the MCC was able to modify but not block. I know that the MCC has to, in this case, select which issues to comment on and cannot always reflect everyone's opinion. This is representative government. Tonight, our task is to select the topics the MCC letter will address and decide whether the council can agree on a position on each item. The actual letter will be written after this meeting and voted on and discussed further at the next, probably not the next meeting, but the following 2 meetings in October will probably be used at least partially to continue this process. The structure tonight will be to ask for nominations of topics for the letter that are reflective of the CDP application that we are being asked to look at. After we generate a list of about 20 or so topics, the council will be asked to indicate the top 10 or so topics that will be included in the comment letter. And then we'll take the remaining time to start to build some sort of consensus on what the council position is on those items. As I say, this is a lot to do in a very short period of time. We're already 35 minutes late starting this item. But we do have a little bit more time than I thought we did to do this, to continue this at future meetings. I'd like to start that process by referring to some information that we have already gotten from community members. If you'll allow me, we've gotten emails from, before the meeting started, from Ruth Mezen, from Catherine Murdoch, from Ed Richter, from Susan Karen, from Walt Van Huff, and I hope I'm not saying any of his name poorly, but I might be, Rich Francis, and JQ Uswine. I've taken the liberty of selecting points that people made and starting the list of potential topics with the comments that people made in their emails. And I think Michelle is going to be compiling this list of topics, and she already has these to start her list with. And just to tell you what the topics we're going to start with are poor public transit, safety of access from Highway 1, need for preference for local residents to be living in the community, traffic impact, lack of sewer capacity and other infrastructure, lack of access to stores and amenities, lack of a complete comprehensive disaster plan, and inadequate environmental review, including contamination and potential presence of endangered species. So those 6 or 7 items are already on our list that we will be considering tonight. I'd like to add another 15 to 20 items for us to consider so that we can get a good sample of what people are concerned about and then start narrowing it down, because we cannot say everything about everything. So if that makes sense, what I'd like to do is start with the council and go around to each member and have each person say one thing they want added to the list. And this is just going to be like one thing, no arguments, no explanations, just an item to put on the list. So I'd like to start with Dave.
Thank you. My top item remains the access to this project, specifically at Carlos/16th and Highway 1. The traffic impact analysis, chapter 13, itself seems to conclude from its wording that this cannot be made into a safe intersection without extremely expensive work. And I find that to be a major issue.
Okay. So Michelle, you're adding this to the list, right?
Yeah, if you want, I can share my screen along with the timer and put that on the screen. Do you want me to do that or not?
We're not going to leave the timer for this part because we're just going to go like lightning round.
And if we share the screen, then we can only see one person's face. So I would prefer that we only share it occasionally.
Yeah. We'll ask for that later if you would. Okay. Greg, one item, please.
Well, you mentioned infrastructure, and I guess my comment would be that there are several things within infrastructure that might be broken out. You may recall we don't have adequate fire hydrant pressure for large buildings in Lost Beach. You may recall we don't have firefighting water storage for more than a residential building 2-hour fire. And then there's the question of water supply from MWSD. They have approved that they've got reserved water, but they also have a study showing that they had to cut back on their use of their aquifer in the 3rd year of a drought back in 2018. So, I mean, I could see breaking that out into further study and questions, and I have emails outstanding to CAL FIRE and to MWSD to see if there's any update in the last couple of years on the insufficiency that previously was demonstrated. So it's all under infrastructure, but there's subtopics.
Okay, so you're emphasizing water in your item at this point.
Water, including firefighting water.
Including fire. Yeah, okay. Dan, one item to add to the list.
I understand that this is complicated, and I'm gonna make something very simple. I think that the Midcoast Community Council should endorse ECO's position, which covers really, they've been involved for since almost the inception of the idea. They know all the bases are covered on their end, so that's my position. That the Midcoast Community Council endorses the position of Midcoast ECO.
Okay, thank you. Len, one item.
Yes, I need to show my screen.
Claire, do you want me to allow screen sharing?
Is it for one item that you can say in one sentence?
It illustrates it better than I can say it. It has to do with complete streets for pedestrians and bikes.
Why don't you just say that's something you want to put on there, and then when we get into talking about it, we can discuss.
Okay, it's the problems of complete streets for pedestrians and bikes. As we noted in Caltrans' approach to our recent large highway project, they had a requirement that any project had to provide for complete streets. If you look at the project here, Dave emphasized the route from the project to on Carlos Street to 16th. If you look in the other direction from Carlos Street to California to getting access, that's a 1.5 mile stretch of road. There are 2 or 3 major issues with it. That first makes it difficult for cars because they would line up signal file. There's really no space there currently for pedestrians and bikes, and it's a very difficult road to modify because of its proximity to Highway 1. All of those result in it making virtually impossible to have that be an adequate set of complete streets for the residents, speaking most specifically pedestrians and bikes.
Okay, thank you. Michelle, one item.
Yeah, my one item is a lack of a disaster preparedness plan or any sort of evacuation plan for the coast side. We already know that we don't have that. And so adding an additional 71 units, 140 plus people to the coast side is, especially if potentially with lack of public transportation options, it could be, a big issue if there is a disaster.
Michelle, disaster and evacuation is already on the list. Did you want to have something?
Yeah. Oh, I was just emphasizing that.
Emphasizing, okay.
No additional topics to add.
Jill, one item?
I don't have any additional topics to add.
Okay, I would add development of bicycle and pedestrian trails from Moss Beach to El Granada and from the project to the elementary school. At this point, I'll go to the community and ask people who wish to speak to give us one item to put on the list. We'll do this for, let's see, we have about 14 items so far. Do this for another, say, 7 items or so. So Sid, can you give us one item?
No, I had my hand up for a different reason. I was wondering why we haven't had a mid-pen presentation. We have not had one from them directly. Wait a minute. So let me finish saying, let me talk. I wanted to know, where are they planning to have the road coming in and out? I read their traffic study and I couldn't tell if they're going to have everybody leaving that complex out of Carlos and 14th, or if they're going to somehow route them through the neighborhood streets. It's very hard to understand.
Encourage everyone to read the application materials that we were sent that are posted on the website.
I was reading them.
And
so I think they need to have some.
Please continue to read them and we will move on.
Then I will finish saying what I want.
No, you
Since
won't.
Broadview was here and Ann Stillman's still on, and they said that they wouldn't put in any sidewalks for anybody, but the developer would have to. I want to make sure.
Please.
What?
I'm asking you to stop.
Oh, I just wanted my one thing, since they're not going to come and tell us anything or explain their project to us, is that if they're going to require sidewalks and bicycle paths and everything, that they pay for them and not the county. Thank you.
Okay, so bicycle paths and parking should be paid for by Mid-Penn. That's an item?
Well, and also overflow parking. I think they should make some arrangements, but that's up to them. Yes, paid for. All the amenities that they're mentioning in their traffic study ought to be paid for by them.
Okay. Okay. Barbara, one item, please.
Hi, I'd just like to kind of piggyback on what Len said for the first time ever. I agree with him. The area between 16th or where Carlos goes into Highway 1 and Etheldor, I live 4 doors down from where the project's going to be, their entrance. And this block of Carlos cannot handle any more traffic. There's no parking. I do appreciate that they have doubled the parking from what it was, but there's still not going to be enough overflow into the neighborhood. So I'm concerned about the parking, the extra parking, where it's going to go, and the safety of the street on Carlos. Thank you.
So you're reinforcing what Len said about the complete streets for Carlos and parking considerations.
Right. There's no way to widen it, and the excess parking in the neighborhoods.
Okay. Anne, one item, please.
Thank you so much. I would like to kind of piggyback on Greg's with the water supply. My concern is twofold. One, with the drought, is there sufficient water, and will there be in the future? And two, should we find that there is lead in the soil at the Half Moon Bay Airport? This is where one of the major wells are for the project for Moss Beach. And should that have to go offline, we will all be without sufficient water. And this project would by far add too much strain that I don't know what we would do. You know, I don't know what you would do in that situation where if you take one well offline, then there will be inadequate water for the current households.
Okay. So you're reinforcing what Greg said about the adequacy of the water supply?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
One item, please. Harold.
My turn, yeah. So one is, I have an observation. So the MCC website seems to be 80% county developer, almost, I wouldn't say promotes the development, and then 10 or 20% is only community input. I know you transition websites, but it seems whoever makes a decision what shows up on the website is not necessarily balanced and expresses to that extent the community concerns. So my specific item is potential hazardous material on the website. We know there's a study, but they failed to test for asbestos. They failed to, the whole testing was not appropriate for the website. An example is they tested uphill from the incinerator, but not downhill. And they completely did not test, for instance, an area where the former garage pump station area was, so they avoided certain areas, but they found basically a few tests where they had significant higher lead levels, for instance, but concluded it's safe. So the concern is here, they want to haul 850 truck holds out of that site. I repeat, 850. There's no direct access to Highway 1. So all that potentially contaminated soil will go through our neighborhood.
Okay, so your item would be concerning potential contamination of the soil and related.
Yes, and proper testing.
Okay, testing.
Thank you.
Dolores, your item. Dolores.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute and couldn't find it. Well, I have a whole bunch, but I will say that one of the key things that has not been really done in a proper way is looking at cumulative impacts. And I think all these things that people are mentioning will be impacted by these cumulative impacts that are either in process or going to be. And that was one of the issues in our lawsuit, and I want to emphasize that still is not done adequately. I also would like to say that they did a very poor job at looking at alternatives, because they said, oh, this is fewer than what the previous plan was, and so therefore it's not an impact. And that is bullshit. I mean, sorry, I apologize, but that just does not make sense, and it's not it does not satisfy the community's concerns in any way. And most in particular, I think I wanted to emphasize that they have never tested for asbestos. And that's one of the key concerns that we have about all this soil movement. It's going to be flying around this community, and you can't get rid of asbestos. You know, does not disintegrate. So I'll stop there. I have others.
Okay, I'm sure we all do. So you're reinforcing what Harold said, and you're also mostly emphasizing the cumulative development impacts, correct?
Yes, but it's important to add the specific word of asbestos on what Harold said.
Oh, okay, okay. Teresa, one item.
I wanted to reinforce what Greg said about water for firefighting purposes. Since you're looking for multiple items, if we could consider separately just the general potable water capacity versus water for firefighting. They both seem really important.
Okay, thank you. Any other hands up right now? If not, I will go to the council for one more time. If there's anything else that anybody wants to add to the list. Greg?
I spoke to a traffic engineer I know who turns out has done consulting for Kittleson. And it turns out the traffic study they did not only uses 2017 traffic data, but their assessment of vehicle miles traveled is based on a standard document, edition 9, which is at least 8 years old. And there's 2 more recent editions that have come out that they did not use, and they were available at least a year before they produced this report. This fellow, who will not be named because he still hopes to get work from Kittleson, said he would not have prepared that document and signed off on it. The traffic study is inadequate on its face because it's using outdated standards from the official government agency. So I have to question the quality of the traffic study, and I can research that and document it in detail.
Actually, we've discussed it in some detail. You might want to talk about that offline, but you would like to add the inadequacy or the perceived inadequacy of the traffic study, correct?
They gave a pass. They said it's affordable housing and won't be a problem, and it's totally wrong.
We can add it to our letter. Dan, another item from you or not?
Well, first to say one item, and now 2 items. It's very complicated, and I think the simplest way it would be just to add in the letter that we fully endorse Midcoast ECO's position. They're covering all the bases.
Okay, we got that. Thank you. Len, do you have anything else that you want to add to this? So I'm giving the council a chance to add something else if they have something else they want to put on. So do you have another item, Len, or is that?
I'm fixed on that one item. It extends into evacuation in other areas, but I'll stay with that.
Okay, Michelle?
No, nothing additional that's not already on the list.
Hey, Dave?
Yeah, I have 2 things, and one of them is actually yours from your intro, but we specifically need to mention the lack of the biological impact report in the letter. And the other is, this ties onto the evacuation access. Parts of the documents talk about emergency access through the top of the property off of Lincoln as a given. But nowhere in the plans is that made clear. So I think we should, and I have a lot of details on that, but I think we should point out that they need to be very clear about emergency access to the property.
Jill, do you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I don't have anything to add.
Okay, I'm going to add one more thing, which is the proposed traffic changes to the streets that are currently existing in Moss Beach. I think they need to be rethought. So we have a list now of how many items, Michelle?
Well, the way I have it organized, I have some major bullets and some sub bullets under it. Okay. So
could you maybe share that?
I can share it. Yeah. Sorry, I was just capturing the last couple of things.
what I had originally thought was that the council could do some priority rank voting on this, but we may be able to just discuss this and come up with a list of 10 things we want in the letter. Let's take a look and see what Michelle has for us when she's ready for us.
Yeah. So I was just trying to organize them. And let me know if I didn't capture everything 100% correctly.
I'll say that on the safety of access to and from Highway 1, an important point is that the otherwise favorable traffic analysis states that that is not going to be safe for vehicles or pedestrians. So even their own documents say it will not be safe.
Could I comment that we had a discussion about the cost? One of the residents brought it up of, there it is. Parking and other traffic impacts should be paid for the developer. I would like to generalize that into all infrastructure costs should be paid for by the developer, because there will be infrastructure costs related to water, sewer, and potentially a $3 million upgrade to the water pipelines in that area necessary to get the pressure up. That's pending confirmation from MWSD and CAL FIRE, but all infrastructure, not just the traffic impacts.
So I will point out that is the normal case, that the developer does pay for it. For example, Big Wave paid for the sewer and water line extensions.
But if I could comment, Montera has adopted $1 million in infrastructure contributed by developers, yet it's burdened the rate base for the perpetual maintenance and replenishment of those assets when those infrastructure additions only benefited the properties in question. So there's hidden costs forever to the ratepayers from that extra infrastructure that are not included and covered by the way Montera is currently pricing its infrastructure charges.
Okay. Actually, I think this looks pretty good. This could actually be an outline for our letter. What do people think as they look at this?
Yeah, as long as we flesh some of it out.
Oh yeah, obviously.
But
under traffic impacts, what happened to the inadequacy of the study and the vehicle miles traveled?
Let's see. Well, I said existing documents state it will not be safe. So inadequacy of existing study.
Yeah.
Yes. Flaws. Just call it flaws.
Yeah. So the data is 5 years old. There's essentially no significant difference between the 2018 report and the 2022 report. There are some minor changes, including the 2 pages of traffic demand management, but there's relatively few changes, and that's a huge flaw.
And the complete streets issue applies to more than just pedestrians and bikes, doesn't it, Len?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was.
It pretty naturally extends to evacuation as well, especially on Carlos, where that would be your major evacuation route, and that's a narrow road, a half mile long, that all the cars would have to go on.
Yeah. Was it 2018 to 2022? Are those the right dates?
All the traffic data is from April 2017.
2017.
So in the part about parking and other traffic impacts should be paid for by the developer, in line with what Greg was just saying. It's more than just the parking and traffic impacts. It's
I mean, maybe that's.
So
I have that over here too. So maybe we have a list of impacts that should be paid for by the developer.
Yeah, and we should break it out into are nominally paid because most of what we listed are normally paid by the developer. So
I mentioned sidewalks, but you don't have it on the list.
Yeah, I mean, that's partly under transportation, partly under infrastructure. So we can reorganize this a bit, but.
You don't have, there is no safe crosswalk anywhere in Moss Beach.
Could that be under traffic safety?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Okay, should sidewalks, I mean, maybe we break out these other infrastructure issues as their own thing, and then sidewalks and crosswalks are part of traffic.
yeah, let's not combine sidewalks and crosswalks though.
Okay.
I don't particularly see the problem of sidewalks, but the crosswalks are critical.
Yeah, they wanted those sidewalks to go all the way up Sierra, the unpaved portion of Sierra Street, when Joe Leclerc gave us his presentation. That's why the county's given us tons of documents, but we have never heard from MnPED to answer our questions.
Well, ever. I think that you're right, Sid, that they have talked about sidewalks, and I also agree with I think Dolores saying that perhaps we don't want sidewalks. I would put both of those things under the proposed changes they want to make to the neighborhood streets.
Well,
could we consider adding an issue for accountability? Because there is, it seems to me, no audit mechanism for several of the promises made. There's no agreed upon remediation process. There's no agreed upon restitution process. When processes are promised, you know, like who's going to live there, who's going to follow up and make sure it's done, and what accommodations are made to correct deficiencies. I haven't heard anything about that.
When I went to the first open house, I said, well, what are you going to do about overflow traffic? They said, oh, our on-site property manager will take care of that. Well, I think they better decide to make an agreement with the Mormon church down there, because otherwise there's going to be cars parking all willy-nilly, and Carlos can't handle it. Let's face it. There's not even sidewalks on Carlos.
It's really tight. Okay. Let's not go on about it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did put something in the chat that I would like you to include, and that is that there was a CCAG traffic survey, public transportation survey. And I think there was over almost close to 1,000 participants between Pacific and Half Moon Bay. And I put the link in my chat. So I think they should have included that in their study, because, you know, they're talking about getting all kinds of money from CCAG for this, that, and the other thing in one of the documents I read today.
Okay.
So that's a very non-thorough and self-selected study. So we don't want to use that.
Okay, the list is getting bigger rather than smaller.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, let's talk about stormwater then. There's no coastside stormwater problem, runoff containment. And yet they talked about existing stormwater runoff going into down towards Montera Creek.
Well, I think that overall impact on infrastructure, including sewers, would probably relate to that. I think we've got that here.
You have stormwater there?
We have sewers, and I think that
it can't go into the sewer, Claire.
There's no type of sewers.
They show a separate stormwater system going to the creek, separate from the sewer.
Yeah, I don't think they could do that's environmentally not good.
Oh, one thing.
Retention basins. That's it.
I'm sorry. Just one thing that is very important is that these key traffic problems be resolved before they construct.
Yeah.
Connect the Coastside has construction as in an optimistic scenario that it wouldn't be beyond, it would be like beyond 15 years for anything major on Highway 1. So, that has to happen before they build it. I think 71 units is too big. Why 71?
Well, beyond that, the MCC does have a position saying that the trails have to be built and before we would support this. And I definitely agree that any changes that are going to be needed to the highway need to be made before construction. I agree with that.
Yes.
I don't think we're going to have a lot of disagreement about the actual content. So what we're going to need is somebody to write this letter.
Well, I still want to know if they're planning to route all the traffic leaving the facility every morning. Where is that going down? I didn't see that in the traffic study.
The traffic study says the primary route in and out will be Carlos and Highway 1 at the north end.
So down at 14.
Ecuador and Valimar.
No. Oh, wait a minute. Carlos and Highway 1 is at 14th.
No, it's not 14th.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's what you're talking about.
Not 14th, 16th.
Well, there's a dot for 14th, but that's okay. It's not going through what Joe Leclerc called the village of Moss Beach or the downtown Moss Beach. They're not going to try to send it that way.
Well, secondary path that direction, yes.
As a sidewalk, not as cars.
No, as traffic as well.
Traffic.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That street can't handle it.
That's what I mean by existing streets. I'd like to get, we've done very well with this, much better than I expected. And I appreciate everybody's help and cooperation. What I'd like to do is assign a group of 3 council members to start writing and start asking people to help them with research if they need help, and to come back to this, probably not at the next meeting, but at both meetings in October, and flesh it out and get it approved by the end of October. Would there be people on the council who would be interested in taking responsibility for starting to write?
I'm interested, Claire, but I think we ought to bring a first draft back to our next meeting because we need to know if we're going the right direction.
And Claire, I commented to you on the chat that I'm going to suggest, subject to having adequate volunteers, that you partition these bullet points to more than just 3 people and have, I don't know how many people are going to be interested, but let's say it's 5. Then we can give different bullet points to different people and they all bring draft backs to the next meeting. I do agree with Dave on that.
Well, that's not a bad idea. And we don't actually have to do that at this meeting right now. We can do this offline as long as there's no Braun Act violation to assigning different things to different people.
Yeah, that's fine.
Does that seem acceptable to people that I'll send out?
I don't really like the idea of that just because I think the letter is going to be, there are some of these items that overlap, and I think the letter is going to be probably not, it won't flow very well if we do that. But that's just me from a
I hear you, Michelle, but
perspective.
We can do the flow editing after we get the contributions from the subgroups, is my point.
That's true.
Yeah. Personally, I think 3 people with 1 person doing most of the writing can easily cover this in 2 weeks.
Why don't we see who's interested?
I'm willing to be that person.
Oh, gee.
I would like to suggest that Jill be one of the people that writes this because you seem to enjoy writing letters and you have had a lot of things to add. I'd like to get you in on the ground.
In that case, I'm off the group.
I'm not interested in helping write the letter at this time.
I'll join the group. You're back in, Dave. I'll join the group. Unless you want to get off because I'm joining.
No, I'm okay.
Or we could do this offline.
I think that's probably best, Claire.
Yeah, I will send things out after the meeting and ask for volunteers and select the committee to work on this.
If
I
you
will
want
point
people
out,
to send the comments to a certain particular group leader of different bullet points, will you post who's going to be taking comments for what items?
It'll be in the minutes.
But you're doing it offline. It's not going to be in the minutes. You said you're doing it offline.
Yeah, I will point out if we have more than 3 people working on this, so if we're split it into at least 2 separate parts, that we have to be extremely careful not to communicate across those groups. And I think, as Michelle said, that will be very, very difficult.
That's probably true. There is an awful lot of overlap here. Okay, so how many people all by themselves would volunteer to work on this? It sounds like Dan would and Dave would and Greg would, I think.
Yeah, but I feel my expertise is limited to some of the topics and not all of them.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I mean, how much depth do we need to go in? This is not going to be like a 10-page letter, is it? Like, what? I feel like it's going to be a paragraph, 1 to 2 paragraphs on each of these major bullets at maximum.
That's what I'm envisioning, that we make our statement as to what our position is on each of them and point out major things they need to consider.
It's important for everybody to understand, both on the council and in the public, that we are not writing solutions to these issues or problems. We are pointing out the problems and saying they need to be fixed.
Looks like
we don't need to provide substantiation in terms of research.
No.
I mean, I'm a footnote kind of guy.
No, absolutely not.
Everybody's aware of what the issues are and what the research is.
Harold has his hands up.
I know that. So does somebody else. We're working on trying to put together how this letter is going to take place. And maybe people are offering to help. I don't know. Harold, do you have something?
This conversation going on.
Yeah, I just have a question. So, I mean, when I look at this list, all this has been documented before multiple times. So there's nothing new, what I see here. The only new thing that probably hasn't settled in with folks is we know that even their limited soil testing produced red flags, but they concluded that there's nothing to worry about, but we know that. And they plan to haul 850 truck rolls from that site. We know that a loaded truck can't get out on Highway 1 on San Carlos and 16. So all these trucks with potentially contaminated soil going to go through our neighborhood. This is the only new item that I want to raise here.
Okay, I think that's on here, isn't there? Yes.
No.
Harold, the permit says it's 7,000 cubic yards of fill and 0 cubic yards of cut. So the trucks are going the other direction. They're going onto the site.
I don't think that's right.
So they're not going to remove the contaminated soil?
They're going to remove a lot of soil. That was stated in their reports last time.
So hauling has just been added to the list. You're right, Harold. There is not much new here, and that's why we don't need, I think, a whole lot of argument in here and a whole lot of research that we're going to cite, because almost everything has been documented one place or another. But what we do want to do is to tell them, here's our concerns. Here's what still needs to be done in order for us to support this. Perhaps we'll never support it, but here are the deficits that we see that need to be remedied before anything can happen. And that's all we're going to say is here's our position on each of these things. So that's what the letter is going to consist of.
I do want to ask one thing, which we haven't covered in the past. You mentioned, Claire, that you've been you live next to this construction that's been going on for all this time, and the noise and the disruption on the street. well, how are they going to handle the noise and disruption here for, I mean, certainly, I mean, I guess I'll have to move, but the highway is going to be terrible. We've never really asked them how they're going to manage the highway congestion that their effort will cause.
From construction.
They'll need to fix the streets when they get finished doing it too.
Yeah, but what about the highway? I mean, you think traffic is bad now? What are when they've got all these trucks on the highway? Oh my God.
Well, when they did the tunnel, there were a lot of trucks too. But
not going through the neighborhood. Carlos Street is going to be a disaster.
I do have my hand up, but I want to just say, I thought of one other item for your bullet point. They have, I believe it's 147 car parking, or was it 142, something like that. They only have 5 EV chargers listed, and they just passed a law saying no new gas-powered cars after 2030 will be sold. So could you please put something in there to say that we feel that 5 EV chargers is inadequate for a 147 car parking lot? Please.
We got it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we wrap this up for now and deal with who's going to write this offline.
Yeah, just one quick follow-up on the parking thing. We have parking. I think what we were primarily talking about was off-site parking, overflow parking, right? Or do we think that, I guess what we think is that the parking on-site is insufficient, so there would be a need for overflow parking?
I think they underprovide parking on every single Mid-Penn project, my personal feeling.
Well, so this bears to what I was saying about the traffic study. They have concluded that the parking is more than adequate by 3 spaces, but they have used the wrong standard for the number of trips from an apartment. They're using a definition which is at least 8 years old. And instead of using a rural suburban apartment, which would have much more trips, you follow me? So that's one of the flaws in their study.
Well, it also relates to the lack of access to stores and amenities, because if someone has to drive everywhere and not walk, then they're going to need more parking.
Okay, everybody should understand that by having reduced parking, they get credits for their traffic demand management.
They get credits, we get screwed.
The county and the state both are ask us to encourage people to not use their cars.
So then why do they put people in a remote area?
Yeah, exactly. God.
It's no more remote than people like Barbara or other people who live right next to the project and are getting by just fine.
Yes, but you're talking about adding 71 units.
And 100 cars. I mean, that's a lot of cars in that they're cramming in there. And that's really an underestimate. With 3 bedrooms and 2 bath units, you know there's going to be at least 2 drivers or more.
Please just go look down at Moon Ridge and look at the parking there. And also keep in mind that my street can't handle the parking. And right across behind me is the firehouse that's going to remodel and have more fire engines. There's no parking right in the adjacent area of this, the development. And so there's nowhere for these extra cars to go.
Maybe they'll park in front of the fire station.
Well, that's no good for any of us.
I know.
Maybe the fire station should be on this property.
Yeah, maybe that's where it should be.
That's actually a thought.
You mean
that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think we're going to stop this at this point. We have an outline, and we will get some writers.
So Claire, before before we leave, if we're going to have more than 3 writers.
I think we're going to have 3.
Okay, because if it's going to be more than 3, we do have to decide that in public.
I don't think we're going to be able to manage breaking this thing up because there's so much overlap and it will end up violating the Brown Act.
I'm going to send my comments to Greg.
If the 3 people who do end up working on this want to divide it up and have each person take a separate section, that would be fine. But I think that dividing it up and then having 6 people work on it is not going to be kosher.
Yeah.
And you know what else we could do is we could have 3 people take this first pass, right, and bring it to the next meeting. And then if a separate group of 3 people after our public meeting want to take a next pass or refine it, that could be a possibility too, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
And we can have community members participate, which doesn't interfere with the Brown Act.
It's extremely difficult to do that without violating the Brown Act. It would mean that every community would have to not talk on the council other than those 3 people. Nearly impossible.
No, we just state that. We just state that at our first meeting. Simple.
It's virtually impossible.
Well, I don't know that I agree
really
with that.
think that
We had great success with Terry helping us out with the Caltrans letter. He was invaluable. And I'm not saying Steve Terry's the guy for this, but maybe somebody from Midcoast Echo would be.
I'm just going to send my comments to Greg and he can funnel them back to the group.
I would strongly suggest that if anybody has comments, you send them to the entire MCC using Midcoast Community Council at gmail.com, excuse me. Don't send them to an individual because then we have potential Brown Act violations if they pass them on.
I guess I don't understand. I can't talk to Greg and say, these are my ideas. Please make sure they get included.
Not if Greg's not writing the letter.
I thought you guys are group spitballing it the first round.
If Greg is not one of the 3, which we don't know at this point.
I see.
Then we have problems. So send them.
I don't see a problem with her sending it to the entire community. Sid, I don't know why you would favor me with it. Send it to the entire group.
The spirit of the Brown Act is 2-way conversation.
No, absolutely not, Dan. It's exactly the reverse. It's 2-way only at public meetings. Otherwise, not.
No, I'm saying that the community can send one-way direction information.
They cannot.
Yes, I believe they can.
Talk to county council.
No.
Well,
are they on the call? Can they clarify it for us? Or did they hang up?
There's no reason for you to send information to a council member and expect it to get to everybody else because it won't.
No, sir.
Well, I was confused. I thought you said you're going to divide up and do different bullet points.
We were discussing
just send it to everybody.
I feel like we're
All
just
right.
going around in circles on it.
I'll cover the globe.
Okay, do that.
Can we just wrap this up?
I'll look for your email. Okay. Let's wrap this up and move on to.
Wait, can you put that email that you want me to send it to in the chat that goes to everybody? Thank you.
Yes. At gmail.com.
I'll look in the chat. Thanks.
Okay. So looking for my notes on the agenda. The next item on the agenda is council activity, I believe. Do we have some council activity? I attended the age-friendly communities meeting because they're trying to expand their membership to the Midcoast. I went to a meeting last week and going to another one tomorrow. So I'll keep you informed about what that turns out to be. Lynn?
You're on mute, Lynn.
This morning, I attended the Fire Safe San Mateo County monthly meeting. The topic was interesting, a little bit in the details. In addition, Joe Issel was there representing RCD, and he gave them the update that they have hired basically a manager to take over the position Sheena had for forest health and wildfire resiliency. We'll start in early October. I've been in touch with Joe relative to further contact with the MCC. And I think basically this individual, Timothy Federal, starts in early October. And he'll be basically trying to get grounded in the various things going on. I think there's been at least one meeting set up with people who've been involved in some depth in the issue. But I think by November, he'll be able to come to our meetings. So that's the sort of big picture look there. In addition, I started to do an investigation of FireWise communities with the communities that have used that tool in the past, so that within a month or so, I'll be in a position to bring that forward.
Thank you. Anybody else with council activity?
Well, I could piggyback on that because I have also encouraged some El Granada residents to form a FireWise community. We've recently been apprised of the fact that there's going to be insurance rate reductions granted to communities that are identified as FireWise. And I'm also one of the people that Len's mentioned that's going to have a follow-up meeting with RCD about the scoping project and its findings and what we do next.
Okay. Hey, well, that sounds very positive. At the next agenda or the next meeting, we already.
Hold on, I have my hand up.
Oh, I didn't see it. Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah. So, as you stated before, I was at the booth on Saturday. I was approached by a number of community members, and you know, one of the things that was said. But by the way, Jill did all the footwork, or most of the footwork, I should say. But I was there quite a while. And so on the airport noise, there was a community member that came up and mentioned that there was a lull in the touch and goes, but now the touch and goes have returned at a high number. And I advised her to send an email to the airport and the MCC. It was also brought to my attention about the plans to have a big synthetic turf installation in Half Moon Bay. I'm going to later ask that we put a agenda item for that because it's going to affect everybody as far as the installation of the plastic. A lot of people were really Jill did a great job on that poster board with pictures of the Media Creek Bridge. Let me tell you, everybody stopped and looked at those pictures. People love pictures. I bumped into a guy that grew up in that area in the early 70s, and I got contact with him. But yeah, I guess that's it on my kind of report for the for standing in the booth.
Okay. Well, as I said, thank you for doing that. I thank for everybody that participated. We have 5 more regular meetings the rest of this year. Who's counting? We already have several things that are lined up for the next meeting, including the Quarry Park Master Plan, the Public Works Local Road Safety Program, some land purchases that Mid-Penn wants to make, and I think something else. We do need to come deal with this Cypress Point letter, and we will plan to have an initial draft to look at, but we probably won't make a whole lot of progress on it next week, except to give whoever's writing it a little more direction on how to finish it up. We don't have a drop dead deadline to get it done next time. So I think we can take a little bit of time because we have a lot of other stuff we have to do. So I think, Dan, you said you wanted to look at the artificial turf issue.
Yeah, I think it'll be short, very, very short. And
I don't think we can do that next time, but we can certainly put it on the list of things to do.
I think we should do it next time because it's coming up fast. And like I said, I don't think it's gonna, I don't think it's gonna take a half hour. It's mainly just a quick point and have it on record and to let the community know what dangers they will be exposed to. And yeah, just really quick. I don't see it.
Sounds like we need to find out first the answer to your question to Lena is, does the county have a policy? So maybe we could follow.
Well, I think this is overlapping. I don't think we need to, we don't need to wait. No, we don't need to wait for that answer. We'll get it. Hopefully we'll get it, in the beginning of the meeting.
Okay, any
I
other?
have my hand raised.
Yes.
Yeah, we received, the MCC received a referral for a new AV kiosk at the Seal Cove stairwell, which I shared with some of my neighbors here in Seal Cove, and people definitely have concerns in terms of the potential light pollution, noise pollution, impact on parking and traffic in this area. So I'd like to add that to the agenda for the next meeting. It's going to be reviewed by the Planning Commission on October 12th. So I believe next meeting is the only meeting we would have to weigh in on that.
That was the other thing I was trying to remember what we had that was time sensitive. Okay, there's that too.
So we normally have 3 people reviewing planning. That's Claire, myself, and Jill. It sounds like you would like to be involved in driving that agenda item, Michelle. Is that correct?
Yes, I would. Yeah, because my understanding is that anyone on the council can request that something that's normally reviewed by the group of 3 be brought to a meeting.
Absolutely.
So yes.
I just wanted to clarify that. If you'd like help, I would be willing to help on that. I think I share
Yes.
concerns.
Great. Yeah, I'd love to work with you.
Okay. So we have like 5 or 6 items for the next meeting. So we'll have to kind of sit down and figure out what to do with that. But it's good to have more interest than not enough.
So can we have the turf on the meeting?
I don't know. It'll certainly be there at some point. We'll have to figure out what time we have for each item. Len wants to say something.
Well, Claire, at the start of the Cypress Point, you covered various things that are happening that appear to be briefings or presentations about that outside of what we're doing. Could you repeat what you covered at the beginning? It sounded like there would be presentations or study sessions by the Planning Commission and other things of that.
What's coming up?
Yeah.
The environmental, they have to find the biological resources form that was supposed to be submitted.
Okay.
Then they have to put together an environmental impact review team.
So Claire?
Yeah.
I know that's actually the case for this project.
What?
And in fact, I had an opinion from somebody who would likely know who did not think that would be the case. That this CDP may in fact be the last public hearing unless the decision of the Planning Commission is appealed.
Well, we've gotten information on both sides of this. I guess we should try to narrow it down.
Yeah, I have a question into the planner, but I haven't gotten an answer back.
I guess
the latest information I had was that there would be an environmental impact report, a scoping session, and a chance to review it. I don't know, perhaps that's not true.
I guess what I was looking for is whether the Planning Commission itself will have a study session on this topic.
No.
They will not. Okay.
Claire, can I ask you if you contacted candidates for an upcoming debate or anything before the election in November?
We don't have any place to put that.
I'm sorry, Claire, I don't want to overlook what you just said. It's very important to know whether there's going to be an EIR.
It is very important.
And we had been told, I think Lisa had sent the MCC an email saying that they were going out for bid for an EIR. And the question was, will there be public review of it? And that's a very important question to know.
It is very important. I thought I knew the answer, but perhaps I don't. We need to find out.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, are we ready to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn this meeting.
Dan, is there a second?
Second?
Yes, so Len motioned first.
Wait, Greg is second then.
Greg seconded it? Okay. All right. Claire?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Jill?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes, even though it's so much fun.
And Len?
Yes.
And I am a yes, so that's 7-0. Okay.
Hey, we're adjourned. Thank you so much.
Good night, everyone.
Everyone, have a great night.
You too.